Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code. Slam the gavel for 60% off your first year of Urgent Assist, and this is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcus Golan, passed away in the fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will then face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. And we have Judge Ann Donnelly to thank for this. Please call Governor Hochul, New York State, 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul, 518-474-8390 to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. One last announcement. Visit the site, pleasedoyourjob.com. We need 2,500 more signatures to get a case reopened. That's pleasedoyourjob.com. I would totally appreciate it. I have a brand new guest on. I'm so happy to have Leon Ives on. He's owner and licensed private investigator for GBP Consulting, Investigative Security Services Incorporated. He's also author of Vanished: How to Protect Yourself and Your Children from All Disappearances, as well as Sexual and Physical Assaults. Now, a little bit more background on Leon is he's retired from the U.S. Army after 10 years of active duty and over 13 years in the military reserve. Career fields included military police, counterintelligence agency, civil affairs with assignments to major commands and special operations forces. Active duty units include the 82nd Airborne Division, 197th Infantry Brigade, NATO Headquarters in the Netherlands, the Pentagon, the Defense Nuclear Agency. Reserve assignments included various CIMP and CA units to include the 505th Military Intelligence Battalion and the 478th CABN, Foreign Internal Defense, Unconventional Warfare. And I totally welcome you, Leon Ives. We're going to talk about something completely wildly different. We're going to talk about child abuse clearances that really should be in every state, not just Pennsylvania. So I welcome you, Leon. How are you this morning?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you on. We had talked about child abuse clearances, and they kind of originated out of the Penn State scandal with Commonwealth versus Sandusky. Therefore, anyone working in, hospitals or teachers or coaches, they all had to have child abuse clearances based on the Penn State scandal. I, as a nurse, had to have state police background check, fingerprints, and child abuse clearances done. So why is this not being done? We'll say in any state, say for instance, North Carolina, for instance.
Yes, and it's odd that you mentioned that particular case because I did write about that in my book, talking about child abuse as it's related to sports and coaches and community activities. Yeah, we obviously have a system in place now where criminal background checks can be easily completed for a variety of jobs. I've gone through several of them. Just joining up with Big Brothers Big Sisters, I had to go
Mhm.
through another clearance, even though I just had one for the hospital that I work at. But it's amazing that with all these systems in place, not everybody's being made to get a background check.
Mhm.
And obviously, that's what we want. Anybody that has any contact with our kids, be it the school or daycare service or a sports activity in the community, we want that background check.
Right.
And dealing with the government and having been an insider in the government, there's nothing more frustrating than dealing with them. So as you and I were talking, I wrote my North Carolina state about their criminal background check, trying to get some clarification on the people that come in contact with children and what kind of clearance they need. And I got a one-line response. So I wrote back asking for more details, and I specified exactly what I was looking for, and I never got a response. So that's another thing I address in my book, is dealing with government bureaucracy and being prepared for that. Uh, Heaven forbid one of our children should turn up missing, and you call the police and the police respond, and next thing you know, you're having to argue with the police officer about filing a missing persons report. And I've been through that, not with my children, but with other cases where I was hired as a private investigator to basically get justice. Uh, I've had several cases involving sexual abuses, missing children, everything you can imagine. And it's quite frustrating dealing with the government.
Mm-hmm.
It makes no sense.
No, it's very frustrating because also, as you said earlier, North Carolina didn't answer you back, but parents don't know who really is coaching their children for baseball, softball, basketball. Really, what are their backgrounds? I think parents should now maybe dig deeper into these individuals that are coaching and teaching their children.
Yes, and obviously it's an organization that's running that activity. So go deal with that organization. Hold their feet to the fire.
Mhm. And I mean, some parents might be afraid to do this, but you're going to
Yep,
be more afraid if your child comes forward with some type of problem that has to be addressed by law enforcement.
right. And it just takes a lot of persistence. Yeah, it's difficult.
Mhm.
I've had one particular case where a lady came to me, and there was a man in the school. I got to be careful what I say. There was a man in the school that was trying to groom her child.
Mhm.
And she talked to me about that. We went through it, and she wanted to go to the school and go to the police. And her husband wouldn't let her because he had a position that was rather public, and he didn't want her to cause any problems for him. So there are so many things we're going to encounter whenever
Mhm.
we have any of these issues. And it's going to be up to you to be a very, very strong person and pursue these accusations and get law enforcement involved. Uh, I've had other cases of sexual abuse where I ended up speaking to the head detective, asking him why he would not investigate this case. And the answer was the people making the allegation weren't the parents of the child.
Mm.
And I said, well, that makes absolutely no sense. It's the parent that's abusing the child.
Mhm.
And these are family members.
Mhm.
And he went on to explain the North Carolina law. And I said, well, in North Carolina, if there's a sexual abuse of a child, you have to report that. And he
Mhm.
goes, correct. I said, okay, so I'm reporting that. And that didn't carry any weight with him whatsoever. So I went out and did my independent investigation, wrote up a very lengthy report that detailed all the witnesses, what everybody had to say. Then I presented them with that report.
Mhm.
And at that point, I went to the Child Protective Services and essentially got the same answer, that they would not look into the case because I was not a family member and because the people making the allegation weren't the parents.
Ah.
So eventually we got the through that report I wrote, we got the case pursued, and everything seems to have worked out well as far as I know. But these are the kind of obstacles that we're going to go through. And in my book, I do have a chapter devoted to hiring a private investigator and why that can benefit you. So most people are going to go to a private investigator. And in my book, I will tell you how to interview that private investigator to make sure that he's qualified to handle your specific case. And private investigators are not cheap, but I always tell people when you need a lawyer, you better get a good lawyer and you better get a good private investigator because private investigators typically know how to approach people within the government and get some type of reaction from them.
Right. Because parents try to do this stuff themselves and it just does not turn out good at all.
Yeah. Yes. And in the revision of my book that I'm working on right now, I'm trying to get a little bit more into how to push these people into action. And one of the things I definitely emphasize is don't get into an argument or don't become belligerent because you're not going to help yourself. You will lose. So you have to approach them from a different perspective.
It's so hard to do that. Especially when CPS comes into your home. And unfortunately, I was one of the ones that actually let them in my home. So I didn't know better. But they completely bully you to the point of putting you in tears and destroying your life and career and your children
I cannot imagine.
in one fell swoop. And luckily I was exonerated from all indications of emotional child abuse, but the other parents some of them are taking plea deals on worst accusations. And, we've got to also put an end to calling in anonymous phone calls to CPS and wasting taxpayer dollars.
Yes, I was reading up on that after I saw your book. And you're correct. I mean, as I said, if you are approached like that, you need to know what your rights are as a citizen. And that should be the very beginning of the conversation. And then if you feel that you are a suspect or you're being targeted by CPS or anybody, it could even be the police that do child abuse cases. If you need, go get a lawyer.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with getting a lawyer, and there's nothing wrong with getting a private investigator. You just let the social services worker and the police know you have every intention of cooperating and ask them to write that in their notes, but you feel it's necessary to get a lawyer for your own best interest.
Yeah, see, that's where I regret. As soon as I let her in my home and she sat on my leather couch while she wore her pleather cowboy boots, and then she started screaming at me, that's when I should have said, "Please leave my home. I'm contacting my attorney."
Exactly.
And that's where
Exactly.
I messed up.
Yes. And that's okay because we just don't know. We've
No.
never faced these issues. But it's time now to start learning because the system can be quite traumatizing, as you well know.
Oh, yes. And, I think I told you I get phone calls from parents and, I go over their case. I'm not a lawyer, so I can only give you my opinion. But some of these cases are so horrendous, worse than mine. It's the same. It's almost like it's the same case, but different state or a different type of scenario or a different relative calling it in or a hospital calling it in or, your neighbor. You don't know who to trust.
Right.
And I feel sorry for parents with young kids now.
And you mentioned different states and different systems. but it all boils down to one thing, and that's individuals.
Hmm.
And that is the mentality of that individual talking to you.
Yes.
I worked a cold murder case here in Raleigh as a private investigator, and it's a quite lengthy discussion, so I won't get into it. But dealing with the prosecutors and the detectives and everybody else was extremely difficult.
Hmm.
And I found another suspect who could have committed the murder, and I got his DNA. And all I simply asked the prosecution or prosecutor to do was to run that DNA against unfounded samples that were discovered at the murder scene, and they wouldn't do it. They said our man is in jail where he belongs, and I said, okay, well, if you're wrong about this, and remember that you prosecuted him 3 times before you got a guilty conviction, I says, let's think about the killer that's still out there.
Hmm. Oh, very good point.
Uh,
Uh,
and basically, they just said, no, we're done with this case. So these are the problems you're going to run into, and they're very, very difficult. And I even spoke with the public defender and tried to get him involved. And he said, well, there's really nothing else we can do. He says, the case has gone through the appeal process and it's over. And I said, well, yeah, but if new evidence comes to light, then the case can be reopened. But I did not find any interest from the public defender's office either.
and that's pathetic because I don't know if I had this conversation with you or not, but I had interviewed Adrienne Miranda on my podcast in regards to her son Joseph's murder and that took place in Baltimore, Maryland, and the prosecutor will not do anything. This happened in 2006, and he will not. She has 12 medical examiners ready to go to show how this was a murder, and the prosecutor just doesn't want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. The system is definitely has a lot of faults, but it's going to be up to you to pursue it. And if you're willing to hire that lawyer to help you pursue that, then you can.
Hmm.
Uh, and you know about the Innocence Project, I'm sure. Uh,
Hmm.
that's another course that's available to you, but again, they can only take so many cases because they work pro bono.
Hmm. Yeah, I wish I wish we would hit the lottery so I could dump a lot of money into the Innocence Project, rescue the Fosters. There's so many people I could help if I could just hit the lottery.
Yeah,
No.
it would be nice. But getting back to the children, I do encourage parents to monitor their children and to remember that it's not everybody else's responsibility to protect your child. It's not the school's responsibility. It's not the police's responsibility. It's that parent.
Hmm.
And that parent is the first line of defense. So when you have these situations with who is around your child, well, if you have a suspicion, then you should be there. Don't take your children to community activities and just drop them off and come pick them up an hour later or
Hmm.
2 hours later. You need to be there. You need to be their watchdog.
Oh, definitely. It's just I had no problem taking my son to his basketball because we had these laws in place for the child abuse clearances. So everything was on the up and up. And but not in these other states. Even with foster parents, they're not doing child abuse clearances on foster parents. On top of these coaches, judges, or yeah, judges, teachers, lawyers, uh, that nothing's being done in any state, especially in Kansas. Nothing.
And like I said, it makes no sense because the systems are in place. It's just a matter of having these coaches or whoever simply go online and submit all the paperwork,
Mhm.
and then they will have to go get fingerprints, obviously.
Mhm.
And the clearances are all automated for the most part. There are rarely any more interviews. It's just record checks through national and state databases. So the system's in place. It can be easily be done. I
Mhm.
just can't understand why they're not being mandated.
Yeah, it's not being mandated, and it should be. Um, you could have, say, for instance, a person that had a felony in the past coach your children. Uh, uh, you, you don't know who's coaching your children, and parents need to please listen to this podcast so they know they're aware of what is out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would take a couple of parents to go to the organization that is in charge of that program and just tell them, make your demands known to them. Ask them why they won't do something. The checks are very inexpensive.
Mhm.
Uh, so parents need to learn to start pushing people into doing the right thing. And you're right, it's very, very dangerous. I wrote about the case with the Boy Scouts of America.
Mhm.
Uh, and when they were forced to start hiring certain people and the problems that came with that, and now that is becoming a problem with others. So if there's any record whatsoever of anything that's a felony, or especially if it involves any type of physical or sexual abuse, then we need to weed those people out, get them away from our children.
Oh, definitely. Like abuse victim will not come forward for almost it might take them 12 years to come forward if they have been abused when they were a child, like say from a coach or a teacher. I mean, does a state want to wait for this to happen to a child, then have a child come forward with this, then to totally implement and force the child abuse clearances in their state? Do they really
Yes,
want to wait for that?
yes.
And so that's my beef. So when found out, because I really thought naively that this was a national thing. Once the Penn State scandal broke, I thought, oh, this is going to happen nationally. Everyone's going to have to do child abuse clearances. Oh, no, not at all. No, it's only in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And it's no different if we had a large business and we were going to hire a financial officer to manage the funds, we would certainly look into his criminal records to see if he has any related charges of embezzlement, theft. There's a host of things.
Hmm.
That's done all the time, but yet we're not going to do that for our children. That's
Good
what I
point.
find amazing.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we're not going to, we treat our children so lackadaisically. I just cannot believe this is going on.
Yeah.
And again, CPS doesn't really do their job either. That's another podcast on itself, Leon.
Well, I think you have probably read there's been several cases over the past several years where they found out that they were doing ghost interviews.
Mm.
So they had to go out and check all the boxes off for their investigation. So they would simply write in that person wasn't there or not available, or even go as far as to write up an interview that never took place. And that was quite a big scandal nationwide. It wasn't just here in North Carolina. So any organization is going to have its bad apples. It can be
Mhm.
law enforcement, it can be social services, child protective services, uh, but we just have to push through all these problems, through
Mhm.
these bad apples. And I tell people often, don't judge law enforcement, don't judge child protective services, judge the person who's not doing their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and I'm sure you're no different. If I had to go talk to someone at CPS and they were screaming and yelling at me, then we would go approach their supervisor,
Mm-hmm.
their frontline supervisor, and explain to them exactly what's happening. And then if you don't feel that you have achieved anything or you haven't gotten the satisfaction you need, then go up the chain of command, go to the next level in the next level. Uh, don't be afraid to do that.
Oh, see, that's what happened to me. I was not afraid to let the governor know he was newly elected. What happened with my case, with the first caseworker with the pleather cowboy boots, right? And so their office approached the CPS office and they rattled some cages. And then I had talked to the head of the caseworkers after that. And I said, I hear this happened. What happened? And he said that no caseworker is allowed to call a parent mentally ill unless they have a PhD in psychology. And that they did remove the caseworker I had. And I said, okay, so then you promoted her, right? He goes, no, I wouldn't call it a promotion. She's not fit to be around people. So we gave her a desk job. So then what happened, and I'm going to warn everybody because there was retaliation, because once I was exonerated and cleared of the first indication of emotional abuse, 4 days later, there was another indication of emotional abuse by a different caseworker. This was the retaliation that cost me my job as a registered nurse.
Hmm.
So there is this retaliation factor that people are deathly afraid of. And I didn't know they would retaliate. I just thought they would do their job.
Yes, we always wish the best in humanity. And you mentioned going to the governor, which was a smart move. And I think most people should know you can also write to your state representatives from the General Assembly and even to your federal level in Congress. And it's amazing because it has the same effect when your government went to CPS and demanded to know what was happening. Well, when that comes from Washington, D.C., everybody scrambles.
Mhm.
Of course, that's where their money comes from. So, I do encourage people to, if you have to take that chain of command, that can be all the way up to your senator and your House representative.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Uh, and I guess not to be afraid of retaliation because I beat that indication as well. On top of that, my child wouldn't even speak to the caseworker at all, so I give him credit for that. Also, I would also like to add that had I known earlier, I would have instructed my children that if you're ever pulled out of your classroom and these caseworkers are allowed to talk to your child without a someone watching. So your child's response should be, I'm not speaking to you until my lawyer here is here and present. End of conversation.
Yes, or at least your parent. I mean, police officers know that. They won't go in and interview a minor
Mhm.
without the parent's consent, and it should be no different in school. But we know
Right.
what's going on in our school system. I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
there's a lot being done behind the parents' back with children in school.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't understand that.
No. In fact, I called the school and I said, "Yeah, what is your protocol when CPS comes in and pulls a kid out of class and, talks to them? Is there someone else in the room with them, like a chaperone?" And they said, "No, we just put them in a room and we just let them talk." I'm like, "Wow."
Yeah,
I give up. That's why parents have got to tell their kids, "Do not speak to these people until their lawyer is present."
yeah,
End of conversation.
yes. Ask for your mother or father or a lawyer. Uh,
Right, right. And I'm sure at some point all of this will come to fruition with child abuse clearances in every state. But tell me, how long did it take you to write your book?
uh, It took a very long time because I was going back and forth to Afghanistan.
Hmm.
So once I finally sat down and I had a long break of a few months, I started working on it. And then I would have to put it off and I would start working on it. So it took me about a year to finish it and get it published. And it's available on Amazon.
Hmm.
And then working on the revision took a while, and now working on this third revision is taking even longer. I think I have an issue of self motivation.
Oh, it's hard to I totally understand because I'm putting together a fourth book, and I totally understand. It's so hard. I hate sitting down in front of a computer. I just hate it. Um, it's like, I don't know. So your title of your book is Vanished.
Yes, yes. There's over I think it's 2.8 million children who run away every year.
Mhm.
So that's a lot. And when the police respond, obviously they're going to try to tailor their conversation to this being a runaway
Mhm.
because it saves them a lot of work, saves everybody a lot of work, a lot of expenses. The problem is I tend to think of runaways that have disappeared and nobody can find them as being kidnapped
Right.
because they're being kidnapped after the fact. They've left home, they've run into a predator, and that predator has taken hold of them, and that's why nobody can find them.
Mhm.
Uh, I spent my life finding people as a criminal investigator and as a special agent for the government.
Mhm.
It's not hard to find people, and yet we will let these children disappear, and there's just not a big focus on getting to that child just because of the volume. And I've had police officers tell me that they often see these children at bus stops and hanging around the streets, obviously minors, and they talk to them, and they really don't have the authority to take custody of that child and try to find out who the parent is, and at least let the parent know that the child is in such and such a city and is alive. Uh, so our
Mm.
system really needs to be overhauled when it comes to
Oh,
disappearances.
most definitely. And I was looking at your reviews. One parent wrote, "This is an eye opener. I read this book with my husband. We have learned so much. I have been a victim of both stalkers and identity theft. I wish I had read this book before. We learned and implemented a lot about home and personal safety. We have stepped up our home security systems and monitoring." And she goes on to explain. And and she says, "Don't miss out on this learning opportunity for you or a loved one. Your life may depend upon it." So everyone
Yes,
should go get this book, Vanished. And um, you've got to read it because it's Vanished: How to Protect Yourself and Your Children.
yes,
And I
yeah.
thank you for writing that book. And um, can you give some advice? Because people ask me, how do you write a book? Is there any advice you can give someone?
No, I am not an author. So I just sat down and started writing, but I did a lot of research prior to that.
Oh, I mean, I'm so grateful for that. So grateful for that and your interview. And any last words you would like to add?
No, I just ask that parents take the responsibility to monitor their children and watch over them. I hate to say this, but don't trust people you don't know. And sometimes you may know that person and you'll find out later you shouldn't have trusted them. So parents need to be more active in protecting their children.
Oh, very, very true. Very well said. And, and if your kid is in a softball or basketball and you find out the coach has had some child abuse issue that has not been cleared or whatever, I hate to say it, but pull your kid out.
Yes. Yes.
Now, if anyone needs to reach you, how can you be reached?
Uh, they can send me an email. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to give a easier one. They can email me at Leon, Leon, Ives, Ives, 2014 at yahoo.com.
Gotcha. I'll put that in the um, comments in here. And don't jump off, okay?
Okay.
I'm so grateful you came on. Slam the
Thank you.
gavel. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth, and Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children. And join us again here with Leon Ives and other exciting guests in the future. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, and other platforms I don't even know about. So please donate to buy me a coffee to keep these podcasts going. I totally appreciate you, Leon Ives.
Thank you.